Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge. Over the past couple of months, we've been running a mentorship program for people of different personality types. We started with INTPs, then we did a group mentorship for INTJs, and right now we're doing what is basically mentorship and group coaching with INFJs. And we've noticed a pattern in each of these courses that a lot of people right now are starting their own businesses, or at least starting some form of enterprise. That makes sense. A lot of people are stuck at home right now. They're not able to make money in the more traditional way that they're used to. And then there's just a lot of people who maybe already have started businesses, or they're doing app development, or maybe they're coaches or consultants. And they're thinking about using this time period as an opportunity to really scale up or amplify what they're doing. Somebody said in a recent one of these mentorship programs, it sounded like a quote that you and I have talked a lot about, Joel, that it was incredible how much starting a business really required of them. Like, it was effectively one of the most intense personal development, projects or just experiences or opportunities that they had ever had in their life. And that goes back to a quote that we've talked about, which is somebody had actually said this to you, I think, which is that if you want to really do amazing, push yourself to your limits growth work, become a millionaire. Because the kind of person that you have to do to become a self-made millionaire stretches you way beyond anything that you would have ever anticipated. So what we want to do, and we're actually going to have a series of podcasts, is we're going to talk about what it takes to start your own enterprise, what it takes to maybe become a little bit more entrepreneurial or maybe intrapreneurial within a company. Because we actually think that there's a lot of crossover between it and personal development and growth. And also, it feels like the time is right. Last year, around this time actually, we did a 3-part series on becoming an influencer. And the things we'll talk about in this series of podcasts will probably echo a lot of those principles because there's a lot of crossover. But not everybody wants to be an influencer. Not everybody wants to put themselves out there or have their face everywhere or get that much attention, or it's just not their path. So we thought we would take some of those same principles and apply them to things that are a little more low-key, a little bit more ambitious for business and a little less ambitious for star power. And so in this, we're going to do a 3-part series about the principles and the things you need to know when you are thinking about starting your own business or maybe becoming more entrepreneurial. And also be hearing and listening for some of the things that going down this path helps reflect back to you and the ways in which it can help facilitate your own personal growth experience.
I think that it can help your personal growth. I think that starting a business, even just a small solo entrepreneurial business, can be a huge growth opportunity for you in that you have to contend with your self-worth, your value. You put yourself out there. Will people pay for your services, for the things that you want to do for them? And maybe not. And what does that mean about you? Like, it's all these things you have to work with. There's like these internal challenges around your value and worth. And then you've got all the external challenges of growth, having to learn new skills and competencies and all of that. And, it's a challenge to start your own enterprise. Yeah.
And you've got some of the philosophical challenges that come along with it, which is if you're used to working for other people, it's hard to, it's kind of easier to justify that you're like sort of trading your time and labor for money. But when it comes on you to generate that money in order to get a paycheck, you're paying yourself. Sometimes because you have such a direct experience with people's money and the thing that you're offering them, there can be a lot of questions around whether or not that's even ethical. Like, a lot of people who have value to give to the world sometimes stop themselves because it feels wrong to take somebody's money. For some reason, it doesn't feel wrong to take somebody's paycheck, right? Like a company's paycheck that gives you money, and they generated it from somewhere, right? Like, they're generating it from people, but they're the sort of the middleman. And that's much easier to contend with emotionally and psychologically than it is that people are giving you money directly. And if they give you too much or you charge too much, or like there's a lot of stuff in there that you have to really work out. How much should I charge? How much shouldn't I charge? And I think the reason why it really facilitates a lot of introspection is because it's not just a matter of figuring out how to set up a business, like you were talking about the external stuff, the logistical stuff, which is tough. That's difficult enough. But it's also sort of the psychological and philosophical challenges that come in there, and how you contend with all of that as well.
Absolutely. So I think it is a fantastic avenue for growth. Not for everybody, but often for many people. And you listening, this might be resonating with you. And also, let's put the personal growth side of it to the side. Let's just push that off for a second and say, you might just need money right now. Yeah. And there may not be a job available. You may not have work right now. And you might need cash to pay your bills and to survive, especially given world circumstances.
That's true. I always think everything is a personal growth opportunity, but the truth is you might just need money.
Yeah.
And that's fine too.
So I think we can address both of these. I think there is inherent personal growth in this, and also there's an opportunity to be able to take more control over your financial situation, have more control over your destiny in your life. And I think that's a good thing. I think when you have more control over your finances and your money, it actually gives you opportunity to feel more in control of a lot of things in your life. You have a sense of scaling up, and you have the ability to look at things, and you feel more sovereign and more in control and more at cause rather than effect of things.
Yeah, more agency, more sense of you can create the world or the life you want. There's a lot of that gets woven in when you start to put that responsibility, but also that autonomy on your shoulders.
Absolutely. So in this series, what I want to do is start with the philosophical, like the underpinnings of what's actually going on in business. And then as the series progresses, we're going to get more tangible, more practical, and give you some action steps you can take away to start implementing if you want to start your own small business on your side, right? In your own life. So let's talk a little bit about the philosophical stuff. Now, we're making some assumptions here. One of the big assumptions that we're making is that the world is having a major shift in how it sees the workplace, making money, value creation, employment. We believe there's a huge shift on the horizon. Now, this shift has been coming probably for the last several hundred years from a leadership standpoint. A lot of leaders have already been thinking this way. But we believe that at the lower levels of society, like all of us normal people that aren't in like positions of being presidents of countries and leading major corporations, you and me listening, we're also now experiencing a shift. And this shift is going more from a institutional connection to how we get our value and our money to more of a personal, autonomous way of getting our value and money. Institutions may still be involved, but there's this more of it's almost like a CEO of your own career or your life. And we've done a podcast around spiral dynamics and the Graves model, where we go into a model that explains what's actually happening here. And from a technical standpoint, we believe that the world is moving from what is called a Graves 4, or sometimes it's the color blue level of awareness or life circumstances, which is very institutional focused. People find their identity in institutions, maybe the company they work for, the church they belong to, the political affiliation they associate with. That's where their identity is baked into. We believe we're shifting from that to more of an individualistic Graves 5 orange style of engagement in reality.
Now, for those of you who are the geeks and nerds who love to go down, the rabbit holes of these models, we're not saying that it's going to 5 or orange, like as in leadership, because a lot of people feel like we're actually entering a 6 or green time period. We're actually seeing the shift that the median is going to orange or 5, meaning that leadership might be heading towards 6, and we might be getting a lot of 6 ideals. But the average person has traditionally been 4 or blue for a long time. And it looks like that is hitting more of like an equilibrium between 4 and 5. And in fact, it might be tipping over into more of a 5 average for people. And when you've got two different Graves levels or spiral dynamics levels that are sort of, one is transcending into the other. it's not like this sort of beautiful transition that's really elegant. It's actually more like tectonic plates that sort of crash into each other, because you end up in a power struggle, like the power struggle of the level that was used to calling all the shots at an average place, which is 4 or blue, and a new style of 5 and orange that is now getting to a place of far more independence. And so whereas 4 always thought that it had to be in charge, it's now becoming more of it's actually right now doing, in my opinion, a lot of power grabs, but also it's quite neglected in some ways. You can see this with sort of crumbling infrastructure, at least in the country that we're living in. You can see a lot of Graves 4 things being ignored and neglected. And also at the same time, you can see 4s trying to do a lot of regulations on 5 and orange, a lot of almost overreaches. And 5 and orange is trying very hard to sort of put 4 in its place. Like you'll see CEOs of major social media companies sitting in front of Congress trying to explain sort of their existence, even though those companies are arguably as powerful and as big as some countries. So it's a really interesting dynamic that is surfacing. And I think there's a bit of a death rattle going on for 4 and blue. There's like a bit of a one last major effort to be in control and power. And 5 and orange is sort of like giving it its almost like the respect of somebody older, right, who's been around for a long time. But then, just like any kid that shows respect for an elder and then goes off and does whatever it wants to anyway, we're seeing a lot of that as well. So on sort of a mimetic level, I think what Joel's talking about is that there is a very interesting transition that's happening in the world right now. And because of that, because those tectonic plates are sort of colliding, there's also changing sentiments in individuals, which of course is how a level up, quote unquote, a level up happens, is that people's sentiments alter and change. And there's a lot more of, as you mentioned, Joel, I'm the CEO of my life. There's a lot more gig work, a lot more contractors, a lot more 1099s, a lot more sort of guns for hire than there ever were before, particularly in creative classes. And that's becoming average. That used to be unusual, right? Back, especially when people were very tied into their 4 and blue institutions, most people hired on with a company, and there was a time when companies were loyal to them and they were loyal to the company, and then of course that wasn't necessarily always the case, and maybe that's one of the reasons why we gave birth to 5 and orange. But there was a time period where people were like sort of loyal, and there was a reciprocity of loyalty, which is no longer the case anymore, and there was a lot less gig work when that was happening. But now the gig work is the norm. And so because of that, it's created an open-mindedness around it. And it's also created companies that capitalize on the gig work mentality, like Uber and Lyft and other companies that allow you to be an independent contractor within the framework of this conglomeration.
So technology and globalization is helping fuel this, obviously. And I think that's a really good point. Uber and Lyft and some of these other companies, we're shifting more from a corporation, an entity that is an institution, like an IBM computer company, to more platforms and aggregators, right? Because platforms and aggregators enable this kind of economy to exist. So if you look at trying to produce a television program 20 years ago, you'd have to go to a corporation and you'd have to pitch them the idea. They'd have to hire you on. They would pay for the production of that, and then they would produce it and release it through their distribution channels, whether it's, movie theaters, television stations, whatever. That's the avenue for production of something in the media. Well, now we have a platform, right, and an aggregator in the form of YouTube. Anyone can put up content on there, and the platform itself helps you distribute. So now you're your own independent producer using a Graves 5 platform, and you can even generate revenue, right, with advertising against it. So the shift is happening where there's more platforms. Uber is a platform that allows an independent operator to run their own taxi service, basically. Airbnb is a platform that allows a homeowner or someone that owns property to rent their property on the platform. So we're moving away from companies controlling all of it, owning all of it, to platforms, which puts the control and the ownership in some ways back into the hands of people. And so it's interesting to see a lot of Graves 4s fighting things like Airbnb, fighting things like Uber. Ultimately, this is not going to stop. This is going to be happening. Like this is inevitable. This is going to be happening. Shopify has the ability for you to set up a shop, or Etsy has the ability for you to create content on their platform and sell it in this Graves 5 world that's emerging, right? This is the new game that's being played. Some people don't want to play this game, right? Some people have all sorts of aversions to this, and maybe they've got really good reasons for it. And so that's the next assumption that I think we're making, is that you will be able to put aside any of your political, ideological, moral, or ethical pushback against this. I just want you to look at this in what it is, not what it should be. Because maybe you really believe that it should be a different way. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. I think the world is going to go this way whether we like it or not.
Well, it could evolve to the next iteration of it at some point. It's just not going back.
Yeah, and
right.
so fighting it removes our ability to help shape it.
Yeah.
Like if we fight against it, it removes our ability to help shape it. If we work with the energies that are going this direction, I believe we have the ability to help shape it, right? We have the ability to invest in these platforms and things and help shape the way they're going in the future. So that's a personal opinion, but we're going to make the assumption that we can pull apart our personal opinions from how you could start your own business using the platforms available, using the world around you right now to generate cash for yourself as an actual thing for your family or yourself, right? So these are assumptions that we're making. In order to talk about starting your own business, we talk a little bit about money. Money is value capture. Like anytime value is created in the world, we have decided in our world that we have this agreed, shared consensus reality that the value that's created from any output, from a human or from something that's been done in the world, we translate that into these little green, what Robert Anton Wilson calls biosurvival tickets, right? Now, they're all ones and zeros now. They're online most of the time. We don't actually carry cash around that much, but just use the idea of maybe a dollar bill or whatever currency you use in your country. There's a captured value represented in that. And that captured value can be traded for goods and services. But really what it is, it's captured energy, it's captured output, it's captured value creation in some way. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about fiat money, is a shared consensus reality of value capture in the form of these little green survival tickets. And we all agree that this is how reality works. We all agree that if I hand you that little green ticket in my country, that's the color of it, you will give me a good or service back for enough of those. If it matches what you're charging, that value capture, I hand those over, you hand back the service or product to me. And this is what's happening anytime we go to a job. We're trading hours of our life that we've agreed to for a certain number of those little green tickets. So we say, for 10 of those little green tickets, I'll give you an hour of my time, let's say. So you go and you give an hour of your time and your effort for that hour, and then the company or the place you're working at hands you 10 little tickets in return. So you earn these little tickets back for doing that hour of task. That's basically how we all start out typically getting a job, right? Most of us have a job where we do this, trade our time, like a slice of our life, a very part of our essence, our time and our effort, for a certain amount of these tickets. When we start thinking about business, though, this starts to skew a little bit because it's not as much of a one-to-one correlation. Now, it depends on the kind of business you're starting. A lawyer, for example, has their own business in some ways, right? They're billing hours. They're still trading hours for dollars, but the price point of those tickets is so much higher. Doctors, lawyers, people that bill by the hour, that have highly specialized professional careers, but they're still doing the same thing that somebody working at McDonald's is doing. They're still trading an hour of their life for a certain number of those little green tickets. And so you can see that in other types of careers beyond just having a job. Some solopreneurs do this too. If you are a plumber and you come to somebody's house to fix their plumbing, their toilet or something, you're still trading an hour of your time for those tickets back. So I think everybody kind of gets a sense of how this works. When we get into business though, and you're creating a business and creating value from a business, you're starting to shift from just trading hours to value that's a little bit more asynchronous. So you're creating value that can be amplified or replicated beyond just the hours you're trading. A lot of people in our audience and in our mentorship groups and in our, some of our clients are coaches, professional coaches. Often they have an hourly rate. It could be anywhere from $100 an hour up to like $500 an hour. Sometimes it's even more than that. And they realize that there's a limit to how much revenue or how much money they can generate because they have to trade an hour for the value back. And so a lot of them are talking about, how do I change this relationship I have with my time and money I get for my time to make it more asynchronous, to leverage it, to have scale with it, to be able to make money while I sleep. It's kind of a funny like internet trope, but it's something that is possible when you have a business because you're able to capture value, just like money is captured value in the form of dollars. There are other ways to capture value besides those little green tickets. And so one of those ways is to own real estate. That's a different way of capturing value or holding value into an entity like a house or a property that's not in the form of a little green ticket. Owning stocks or bonds, things like this. These are ways of having value captured that's not a little green ticket. There are other forms of value capture or holding that value. So if you're a coach or somebody that's creating that kind of money for time situation, and you want to change to a dynamic that's more leveraged, more flexible, you've got to figure a way to transfer the value that you give in that hour with a client into something that can be done without you having to be present during that hour. So Antonia and I, for example, here at Personality Hacker, started off our business doing a lot of coaching, in-person coaching. We're actually going back to it right now. We enjoy it a lot, and it's a really great way to connect with people one-on-one and really touch base with our community because we can't do live events right now. So it's really exciting. But we are trading, in some ways, our time for green tickets back to us. That's what's happening in that transaction. And we realized that if we could capture that value in creating products and services in our company, we're able to now leverage ourselves to where we do the work one time. We create a program. We talk about something that helps maybe like an INTP in their life, learn how to grow themselves, learn how to become a better version of themselves. We capture that value, let's say in the form of a book we write, which we've done. Now that can be replicated over and over and over again, and that value can be extended beyond just the time it took to write that book. And that was a grueling experience. It took many months. Well, actually, it was over a year probably, the whole experience.
18 months, Joel. And it took 18 months.
Antonia like crawled out of that experience like like a war veteran over dead bodies to the finish line.
I wish it was an actual masterpiece. It's a good book. It's solid. I wish it was the masterpiece that the amount of time and attention and effort that went into it. But I'm not a professional writer. And so, for the first book I've ever written, we did our best, right, Joel? We did our best. And it's solid. It's a good book. People give it good reviews. But considering how much went into it, but that's what's interesting is that the value, all that time and effort, then got baked into a finished product. And that finished product can now be sold indefinitely, right? From here until that book just doesn't exist anymore. That's now something that captured that value and can be traded for those biosurvival tickets that I don't actually have to be with the person and I don't have to be trading my time anymore. And so it was like an investment of time for technically a small amount of time. It felt grueling when it was happening, but technically a small amount of time that then can be sort of time bound. Like it's bound, the value is bound through time, and now it can get return from here on out.
And this can be done in products like a book. You can capture value that way. Obviously, we talked about real estate and other assets that you can own basically to hold that captured value. And it goes all the way up to a company level, right? You can have a company, the company itself, the entity itself is a product of sorts. It holds value in itself. All the people, all the processes, all the products they produce, all of those things. And publicly traded companies on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange or whatever stock exchange you use in your country you're listening in, these are companies that allow you to now buy into some of that value, right? Through this issue of stocks and the ability to invest in these companies on the open markets.
Well, and it's because it goes away from trading time for money into trading a system for money. Like in order to make money asynchronously, in order to make it so that it's not sort of a one-to-one correlation for your time, your time and the labor wrapped into that time. And the reason why I say labor wrapped into that time is because back when I had office jobs, There were many times when a whole hour would go by and there wasn't necessarily like much labor happening in that. But then there were other times when I was working my butt off. So it was kind of, it all sort of evens out. But ultimately, it's the labor represented in that time. And when you go away from that into something that is more like now representations of value, like property or your efforts like in a book or something to that effect, you're trading that for now a system, right? And a book doesn't really seem like a system, but it really is. It's the system of having, sent it to a publisher, and the publisher now has a system of publishing, and then they have a system of marketing, and then there's the system of getting the word out. So like the podcast itself is a form of the system of selling the book and other programs and products that we've created. And so there's a whole system that now has to be created around that, which of course is why it seems that people who use extroverted thinking or effectiveness take to business a little bit more like a duck in water, because it turns into a the value is in a lot of times the value is in the system that gets created in order to produce or to deliver the value, because you have value and then you have value delivery, and the value delivery mechanisms require systems, and so then you have to take your mind away from time and labor and put it into an idea of system and value delivery mechanism.
The asynchronous ability of that book too is valuable, because, we did a lot of work over 18 months to put it together. It was really hard. And you might be like, well, that's lucky. You do the work once and you guys get to sell copies of that book and continue to make revenue from it, and the publisher as well. And also think about that though. You can purchase that book for $15, $20 United States
less
currency.
Than that. Yeah, I think it's like 12 or 15.
And you can have it on your shelf, and you can go back to it anytime you want. You pay one time, and you at a low price point, quite frankly, and you have the ability to go back to that book. I mean, not just our book, any book you buy, you have the ability to go back to that book and read it. If you were to hire Tony Robbins, for example, to talk to him anytime you wanted to get his information and his wisdom, that would be very expensive to do. But for like $15, $20, I can buy Tony Robbins' book. It can sit on my shelf. Anytime I need to consult with Tony Robbins, and I don't have thousands and thousands of dollars to do that, and a year scheduling out to make sure I got the time for him because he's very limited, I can pick up his book and get some of his wisdom for a very low price point, and it benefits me. So it's a win-win on both sides of that value exchange, right? It's a win for the someone creating it. Tony Robbins made a lot of money from creating his books. And also it's a win for me because I have Awaken the Giant Within on my shelf, and when I have something I want to reference in it, at 3:00 in the morning, I have a line directly to Tony Robbins' mindset, his thinking, immediately when I want it.
And the most sustainable business models are the ones that create win-wins. Like of course, obviously there are some games being played in business, and there are businesses that take advantage and exploit. And usually it's hard for those businesses to survive unless they figure out some sort of like loophole, right? Like unless they're really lucky. They're tapped into a resource that they created a monopoly around, like oil or something. And then they just, through being so powerful, they're able to be exploitative. That does happen. But for the most part, if we're talking about like sort of the businesses that we're familiar with, which is like medium to small, right? Small to medium businesses, it's hard for a business that size to really last unless it's creating a model of win-win. So sustainability is really a big piece of that system too. And that's complicated. It's hard to find something that is obviously of value, that has value delivery mechanisms, has a solid system, and also, is populated by people that are dealing with a whole bunch of stuff right around it and trying to swim in the waters of a bunch of competition. And quite honestly, I don't want to go into like the government hates businesses, but sometimes it feels that way, quite honestly, as somebody who's like a small business. And small businesses are, in my opinion, the backbone of the economy. And also it's hard to do. Like you can really get squeezed as a small business, and you don't have the resources like large businesses do, like this overage to just be able to like cover stuff. If you go against regulations and you get a penalty, you might not even know that regulation existed. You get a penalty, a big company can absorb it, but small companies, it can be really painful. So it can sometimes feel like it's a very complicated thing to get into. Now, if you're just doing a solopreneur gig, you're a craftsman, you're very good at creating a craft and you sell it on Etsy, you're going to have less of these complications. The bigger you get, the more complicated it becomes and the more sophisticated your system of delivery or value delivery has to be, because you have to take into account all the value delivery that happens within the company as well. Like you start getting employees, and part of the value delivery has to be keeping them happy, keeping morale up, making sure they're getting a fair wage, making sure they're being taken care of. And so value delivery becomes really important, and understanding the principles of value delivery become very important as well, which I think is why it does end up routing back to a personal growth thing, because it's you can't just think of it in terms of showing up and I showed up and I did my job and I should get a paycheck. It's now you're responsible for making it all happen, and you have to really contend with the concept of what is value and what is fair to somebody else and what's fair to me, and being able to create that sense of reciprocity, not just with your clients and customers, but also with the people who work with you. And so you have to get really good at balancing all of this and making sure that it's a sustainable win-win model.
Most jobs are process focused, which can be good. And I mean, I've had jobs. I think jobs are great. If you have the ability to have a job, there's a lot of learning that can be done there. But it is process focused. It's the tasks you do and the time you trade. And some jobs are based on delivering results, right? But business is all about delivering results. You have to deliver that value at the end of the day. You can't just do the process. You have to deliver the result as well. And I think that's really what it teaches you when you're doing this. So right now is the best time in the history of the planet to start your own business. There is more opportunity, more options available to you, more support, more help than any time period in the history of the world. Now, you may not agree with that philosophically, ideologically, but just put all that aside for a second and run with it.
Just pretend we're right.
Pretend I'm right, okay? Because I am. Honestly, like you have platforms available. You are probably listening to us through some internet connection you have. You're tied to a global marketplace right now with platforms like Shopify, and I think there's Facebook shops now, and Etsy and YouTube. Like there's so many opportunities for distribution and connection, and there's resources out there and applications and people that are available, virtual assistants to help you. I mean, it has never been a better time to start your own business than right now. Technology is here and it's present. And it really, if you have the creativity, the ideas and the work ethic and some of the correct framing, because I don't think everybody is necessarily cut out for business. I'm not saying everybody should go start their own business. Some people it's just not their thing. But if you're with us this far and you're engaged, it probably is somewhat your thing. And it may just be like some connection points you need to make for yourself. So I think the opportunity is here. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing in your business as we think about this idea of value creation. We talked about how that looks. Now, how does it look for you? How do you connect this idea of creating value for people? How do you connect that to something real and tangible for you to create value for other people? And you might need to start out doing a trade for time and money. So we're going to get into some business models a little bit down the road here, how you do the trade for time, money, business to consumer, business, all this stuff. I want to talk about that a little bit later. But let's just talk a little bit now about value creation itself and how to think about creating value for other people. At the core, at the root of creating value for people in business is solving problems. It's the easiest way to think about it. Now, there's things that iterate off of this idea of solving problems, right? But solving problems is the root basis of what you're doing when you create a business. And the more fundamental problem you solve, the more opportunity you have for customers and people that will exchange those green tickets for your solution to their problem.
Yeah, you're really trying to alleviate pain. A lot of business is finding a way to alleviate people's pain as quickly as possible, or in a way that they can understand.
Correct. So at the lowest, like not the lowest level, but at a very practical, pragmatic level, one of the ways you solve people's problems is by feeding them, as an example. So you could go out and start a restaurant, a small business restaurant, or maybe a food delivery service or a catering service, and you're meeting the physical, biological needs of people. And this is a value add, right? The people have a problem. I'm hungry. You provide the solution in preparing food and making it easy and convenient for them. Maybe it's really good quality food and you feed them that food. You've solved their problem. Now, when you're talking about something that's so ubiquitous, like a human biological need of eating, the other thing you have to contend with now at this level is there's a lot of competition because it's so obvious there's a need going unmet and you have the value creation, the solution for this problem or this need that's going unmet, and you can provide value for that. You can solve that problem for somebody. You're not the only person that has that idea though, right? Everybody's got the idea of, oh, there's hungry people, I can feed them. And so there's restaurants in every town, in pretty much every country, and there's grocery stores. Obviously, this is something humans have figured out a long time ago, how to solve the basic need of feeding people.
Yeah, it's a very ancient business model.
Right.
Probably one of the oldest.
Yeah, but it is solving a problem, right? This idea of hunger, you're solving the problem. And so when we're talking about business, and that's totally a legit thing to do, by the way, but as you go up the levels of abstraction to solving problems that are maybe a little bit more challenging to solve, and maybe not even abstract, abstract's the wrong word. You're a plumber and somebody has a clogged toilet in their house or a broken sink pipe. There's more of specialization in this to solve that problem. You might have to have a little more training to know how to fix that and offer the solution for the problem the person has.
You could almost see it through the lens of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can almost see it as like there are survival needs that have opportunities for business to be able to solve people's pain at the survival level. And restaurants are actually that to some extent. I mean, they're providing food. Now, they're not total survival because you can find food other places, but that's really fundamentally what need it's hitting, is that we need food to survive. And so when there's a plethora of them, then you've got to figure out what differentiates you. And oftentimes it's the kind of food you're making, how good you're preparing it, your level of service, which goes on top of that, your atmosphere, that sort of thing. Like other considerations have to be put in there. Plumbers are like safety and security, right? Like my home is flooded and that's not good. My domain of safety is being encroached upon by an inconvenience or a pain. So I need somebody to come in and do that. And then there are businesses that hit every level of this. The ones that are more difficult to define, even in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top, you've got self-actualization. What exactly is a product of self-actualization, right? And that gets a little bit more murky. But the lower on Maslow's hierarchy you go, the more obvious it is, but the more competition you're going to be experiencing.
Yeah. And so let's kind of just frame that, and you can look at maybe whatever business you're thinking about starting or being involved with on Maslow. And you kind of look at this as a framework to kind of see where you're at. And there's businesses obviously that create entertainment. Well, what problem are they solving? It's the problem of maybe boredom, of too much time on someone's hands, an emotional challenge that they might have. They want to feel good, so they watch a movie, or they want to feel a heightened emotional sense.
Meaning, right? Meaning or relationships a lot of times, because when we get entertained, we feel like we form relationships with characters. And so there's a lot of very esoteric needs that go into being entertained.
Yeah. And you can see how the competition is in some ways stiffer the more abstract it gets, because it's more intense and also less intense. Like you have to be really good at what you do to go make a movie and make it appealing to people. You have to really know what you're doing. You don't have to know as much of what you're doing when you start a coffee shop, let's say. I would say you probably need to know what you're doing, but there's a threshold of what you have to know and how the value is created in those two things. The system is bigger with a movie, for example. And
then the demand. Well, you definitely have to know what you're doing more for a movie, because the orchestration of putting a movie together, like Hollywood level movie, is a lot of complex coordination over the course of months of extremely intense, very highly motivated people getting together. Like everybody's got to be super bought in. When you start a coffee shop, it can be like a small little stand outside of somebody else's business, and you're just catching their customers, and it doesn't require as much complexity.
So what most people do when they're looking to start a business, they go, okay, what skills do I have to solve problems in the world? What can I do to solve problems? And they figure out the 5 things they're good at, and they go, well, I'll start a business around this thing, basket weaving. I'm really good at basket weaving, so I'm going to start a basket weaving business. I'm going to teach people how to basket weave because that's what I know how to do well. Right? I'm going to find people that have the problem of basket weaving or whatever. I'm just using basket weaving because it's kind of an absurd example, right? And I'm going to help create a business to teach them how to basket weave, because that's probably a problem they have, because I had to learn it too, right?
We're going to get comments from the basket weavers out there.
I love you all, basket weavers.
What do you mean it's absurd? Basket weaving has a place in our society.
My apologies to any basket weavers.
You're right.
Meant no offense to you. And I think basket weaving can be a legitimate business. It's all good. I'd love to hear from you and figure out your business model, how you've done it. So let me know. But we start with what we know, right? Typically, we're into something, and we want to try to transmogrify that into a business. You might be into typology. You might have listened to this podcast. You might love talking about Myers-Briggs or Enneagram and typology, and you'd love to have a business around typology. And you have to figure out where the problem would be for the skill set you bring. That's one way to do it. And it's a tough road to go down, quite frankly, to try to find, somebody said when I was reading business books many years ago, like if you want to start, like what's the most important thing when you're trying to create a hamburger stand? And everybody's like raising their hand, giving these options. And the one guy goes, a starving crowd, quite frankly. If you want to have a successful hamburger stand, like the quality of hamburger is way less important than the starving crowd, right? I would put it by the starving crowd before I'd focus on the quality of the product. And don't get me wrong, the quality of the product matters, but without somebody to value exchange that product with or that thing you offer, there's no exchange. It's not going to happen. So often what we do as business, we try to connect what we already know to something out there, and we try to either manufacture a problem in the world, or we try to go and we pan for gold in a stream that has very little gold in it, of trying to find nuggets to connect what we offer to this out there.
Well, frankly, it's because people overvalue what they have to bring. Like the assumption is if I'm good at it and I have this to offer, that there will automatically be people who want to purchase this, or they'll want to have it because I value it. And of course, we all overvalue our own experience. And so the assumption is like, well, I'm really good at this thing, so therefore it must happen. Or I've noticed, particularly in today's zeitgeist of a lot of social issues, the assumption is that people are going to care about what you care about. So I have a business focused on this thing that I'm passionate around because I think this needs to be solved in the world. So I have a business around this thing. And the assumption is that there's going to be a whole bunch of people who are just as passionate as you in the same way that you're passionate. And so as soon as you put the, for sale sign or open sign, you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are like, yeah, me too. I totally want to I want to do this thing too. And so there's a sense that if I'm good at it, if I'm passionate about it, if I have it to offer, there's automatically going to be an audience. They've been waiting for me to show up and give it to them. And I think that's where people get really, like when they first start a business, that's when they get very demoralized. And that's when people start to hate marketing because they realize that that's the missing component and that's the thing they didn't learn. And that's the thing they have a lot of emotional stuff to contend with. And then it's also what reflects back to them that maybe people don't feel the same way that you do about this. Maybe you need to start thinking about it in terms of what they want, not what you have to offer.
This is solution-based thinking you're bringing to the table. If you think this way, I have a solution, I have the skill set, competency, I have the solution. Okay, where are the problems for me to apply my solution to? Come to me, problems. And you're going out and you're trying to hunt down people with this problem that you have the solution to is very challenging.
And this might sound obvious, but I cannot say how many people that I've talked to that tell me about their business that they're starting or that they're struggling with or in the early days, that this is where they're at. Like, I think that this is basically, I think 100% of us enter it within this space. This is like basically all of us enter into businesses and enter into the idea of business with this mentality.
So I want to flip that on its head now. Instead of thinking about the solution you offer and having to go round up people that have this problem, start falling in love with people's problems. Start thinking in problem ways. Start training yourself to look for things people need solutions for. Look for the value add in solving people's problems and look for the crowds that are gathering with these problems that are miserable around it that need help. And it may not be something that you directly have experience in solving. This is the other challenge here, because this is what business requires you to do. You identify something that's a problem in the world, a challenge that you see, that there is a tangible solution for of some sort. Like there's some way to fix this. There's got to be some way to fix this. And in fact, if the solution hasn't been found yet, you're probably going to make a lot of money because you're the one that brings the new solution for this problem. But you're trying to find people with those problems, and then you connect, you learn the skills and you connect what you already know to develop yourself to be able to solve those challenges and problems, right?
There's an alternative to this too, which probably feels like the exception to everything we're talking about. And that is, just like Joel mentioned earlier, entertainment. I would also put art in here because, we've mentioned multiple times people who are selling things on Etsy and Shopify, and like they're pieces of art they create, or there's something that isn't necessarily doesn't appear to be solving a specific problem, and it's something that they created and they have to offer, and then people are buying it. But I would say that this is actually solving a problem. The problem is people want art. They want to beautify and decorate their lives, and they're looking for specific things that they themselves cannot create. Like, I listen to music in part because I have no idea how to create music. Like, I play the piano, but not very well, and certainly not to the level that other people are able to infuse their emotions into it. So the problem I have is my own artistic limitations, and other people who are artists solve that for me by creating art that I can then go access and have my life more ornamented. And if a person is an artist and they aren't selling, it could be a matter of marketing, but it could also be that you're not striking a chord. You're not actually solving the problem that that person is experiencing, which is that they want to have a certain emotional response or reaction to something, and it's just not landing for them. Like, it's just, you're not triggering the desired emotional or aesthetic experience that they have. And so even in those cases, you're still, quote unquote, solving a problem, and you're still trying to match what you're doing to the challenges other people experience. And a lot of times it's because the art you're creating needs more emotion infused in it. It needs more skill put into it in order to have the delivery mechanism of having that emotion go from you to them. So even in the cases of things that don't feel like they're solving more concrete problems, even the more abstract problems, it's still trying to land, meet the audience where they're at. I think that's effectively what you're talking about, Joel, is this idea of meeting the audience where they're at, not requiring the audience to come to you where you're at. And that's the shift. That's the reframe. Don't expect to show up and have people, knock down your door. You've got to go knock on all of their doors and explain to them exactly what you have to give, and then see if it resonates with them. And if it's not, then you maybe need to go back to the drawing board. And if it does resonate, well, then now that's what happens when a company starts to get clients.
I think that's a great point about artistic endeavors. I'm an ENFP in the Myers-Briggs system. I use introverted feeling. I would love nothing more than to express myself and time-bound my expressions in the form of something creative that doesn't have to necessarily solve a problem, that just entertains, informs, expresses, and get value exchange for that. And I think that will come in my life. I think that day will come. And I think that if you're an artist and you're successful, that's awesome. Like, I don't think I'm trying to poo-poo this idea of being an artist and the value exchange there, but I do know that's a hard road to go down. And there's things that you have to do, and you have to know about the art world and creating that kind of thing. And Etsy's a platform that allows you to create things that people can buy. And before things like Patreon or Etsy, it was hard to get value exchange for some of the creations you put in the world. Those platforms actually do enable more art. And I would say that most people, that can be a hit or miss. It's very finicky. It's difficult. It's esoteric in how it works. It's harder to lay out a plan for somebody in order to do that. It would be something that you almost have to discover on your own. And I still think there would be value, even if you want to be an artist, to learn some of the things that I'm talking about, value exchange, some of this idea of fall in love with people's problems. Even if you become an artist someday, I think it's going to make you a better artist. You're going to have more of a mindset of what people are actually struggling with, what their actual challenges are, what their human experience is, and your art will become even more robust as well.
Well, and quite frankly, when a person is insistent that people come meet them where they're at, that's a pretty self-focused way of seeing all of this. Like, if you expect people to, to hand over the manifestations of the energy they've put into the world. If they're trading their time for money and you're charging what amounts to 4 hours worth of their life for whatever it is you've created, but you want it on your terms and you just want it to be your expression, but you still expect people to pay 4 hours of their life for your personal expression without thinking about how it lands for them and thinking about how to communicate it to them. That's a pretty self-centered way of looking at all of it. A lot of what business, I think, teaches people, which is why I think it's kind of fascinating that there's a demonizing of this, is that business, if it's done well, requires you to think in terms of not just what you're doing and what you're producing, but also it's a form of communication through this value exchange. It's also getting into the minds and perspectives of the people that you're engaged in this dialogue with. I created something, I'm producing it. It could be a service, right? Not just a physical, tangible thing. It could be a service that you're rendering, but it needs a two-way dialogue to happen. And if you want people to just come to you and listen to you do whatever you're doing without thinking in terms of what it is that they need in their life, but you're still expecting them to subsidize what you're doing through value that represents time of, hours of their life. And you have no interest in trying to market it in a way that they can understand it, communicate it in a way that they see the value in it. Do market research to determine what it is exactly that they need. So you're tailoring what you're doing to their needs, but you're still expecting them to shave hours of their life and put it into these little bio survival tickets and then hand it over to you. Like that's a very self-centered and sort of narcissistic way of looking at all of it. Like there's an opening that happens, like a real understanding and awareness of what people's problems, challenges, desires, needs. Like when you get into business, you start to get really tapped in to what's going on with other human beings. And I think that that's a part of business that ends up not getting as much attention. Larger businesses take up a huge part of dialogue around business. When people talk about business and demonize business in their minds and demonize anything that has to do with finances and economics, they almost always have an avatar in their head of like this evil, corporate conglomerate at the top, twisting its mustache and sort of steepling its fingers. But most business is not that. The overwhelming majority of businesses are small to medium-sized businesses that are service businesses that are trying to really do their best for their clients because otherwise they won't survive. And so I think it's important to understand that most enterprise and business is actually done at a point of needing to think about other people and needing to make it a two-way dialogue and needing to meet them where they're at, which I think is maybe one of the best things about it. It really is. And it turns this idea that, people who are naturals at business, which by the way, I'm not a natural at business. The only reason why I'm going on and on about this is because the self-centered person who expected people to meet them where they were at was me a decade ago. Like that was me. And it's taken this sort of, this journey through business and marketing, this journey through figuring all this stuff out and contending with all my personal demons around it for me to get to the other side and look back and go, oh, I was the asshole. I said business was the asshole, but I was the asshole the whole time. And I think that's probably why I always couch this in personal growth and development, because I really feel like if you can get to a place where you understand what's really happening underneath the surface of all of this, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, small to medium-sized business owners, and even some of the big ones, even some of the big businesses that don't get a lot of attention because they're doing it right. And so they're not like the nasty ones that get put into, like they're taking over everything and how could they? There's a bunch of big businesses out there that are actually doing things very well. And they don't get put in the company or in the public eye. And so there's a lot of people who are actually doing this well. And I think more attention needs to be put on them because that's the backbone of everything, right? Like the backbone of our entire culture is almost always the value exchange that we create. It's the communication between the value exchange that we make. And without it, Basically there is no way to exchange value, right? There's no way to do good by other people and have them do good by you. In the same way that like extroverted feeling or harmony is about getting people together and creating harmonious interpersonal relationships, extroverted thinking, which is sort of I always think of business in the domain of extroverted thinking or effectiveness. It's to organize people to get things accomplished and move things along much more speedily. We are at a place where we can have so many more comforts in life because we have the speed that comes along with value exchange through business. So I think it's an important thing to really think about and understand how vital it is. Now, it can always be done better, and it should be done better, in my opinion. And we can navigate it to a place where it's being done better, but not by rejecting it, but by actually being involved and understanding these core principles of value exchange and win-wins and reciprocity and getting away from zero-sum thinking and thinking all business is zero-sum thinking, but getting into a place where we really understand how this all works and that sometimes we're the asshole, not business.
So we've talked about reframing from seeing you having the solution to offer and having to go mine for people that have that problem to shifting, looking for a crowd or a group of people with a problem or challenge, and then helping reverse engineer and finding the solution for that crowd. Now, there's probably things you're going to be interested in. Like, I'm probably not going to go out and find a bunch of people that have plumbing problems in their life. I have zero interest in becoming a plumber.
We're the people with plumbing problems in our life, Joel.
Yeah. Like my toilet doesn't flush sometimes. So I'm probably not going to go out and look for that crowd. So you're going to have these lenses you're looking for problems through based on your experience, how you're wired, what your interests are. But there's probably industries you're associated with. Maybe there's certain groups of people you're associated with, and you can discover the problems or challenges they're facing and start thinking reverse of maybe how you've been thinking so far. So I want to leave you, as we wrap up this philosophical end of starting your own business, some questions for yourself. The question you could ask is, where's the starving crowd? Where are people gathering that have this problem they're facing that can't seem to find a solution for it? Or there's very few solutions for this problem, this challenge. Start thinking in terms of that. Where are there opportunities for me to solve these challenges for other people? And start to look around in your world and just, you could do this throughout your daily life, even for things that maybe you're not interested in fulfilling. Like the other day, I had to go to, I think, the chiropractor a couple weeks ago. It was before the lockdown. I guess it was more than a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago. And I was thinking about the fact that the medical records that they have there and then the medical records they have in other offices. And I remembered back to an experience I had with my grandmother, who I took her to the pharmacy and 2 different doctors prescribed medication that were in conflict with each other. Thank God the pharmacist mentioned it to me. He said, hey, you can't get this medication for your grandmother. If she takes both of these, this will actually harm her. Thank goodness we had that stopgap, right? And I was thinking in terms of, there's a problem here in our medical industry, that there's no one that's your concierge. There's no one helping you navigate your medical experience. Ostensibly, your general practitioner should be doing this for you. But they're so busy. They have so many people. It's hard for them to keep track of the paperwork of what this other doctor over here is doing and all this. And I thought to myself, what a great business idea possibly, if somebody was interested, an opportunity to have a private concierge service that you sign up for, that you pay a monthly subscription for, and they help manage all of your records, all of your appointments, all of the things that have to do with your medical, especially if you're older. If you're an older person, and this is really important because you have multiple medications and things, and they can consult with you and help you manage the insurance paperwork, help you manage the logistics of organizing your appointments and making sure medications don't conflict. And this would be a really interesting, I have no idea the legal ramifications, but it might be a really interesting concierge service someone could offer that would solve real life problems for people, especially older people that have all these medications and all these doctor's appointments all the time. This might be a really big value add if someone had that idea. Maybe it already exists out there. I don't know about it. Or maybe you could turn it into more of an app that helps manage it on your side. You could time bind it where it's not money for service, but it's an app that helps people manage their health experience for all these different doctors and medications. So this is just something that these things can come to you as you're looking for the problems in life. If you encounter a challenge in your life, think to yourself, could there be a business opportunity here? And even if you're not the person to fill it, you're starting to train your mind to think entrepreneurially. You're starting to train your mind to think in terms of, finding problems out there to solve. You're looking for problems that probably other people also experience. And now you're starting to think in terms of how could that problem be solved? And now, let's say you stumble upon something in your field of study or in your field that you're interested in, and you see that problem. You've already started to wire your mind to think in terms of how could I solve this problem? How could I help this experience for this group of people here be better and increase the quality of their life, solve this problem, provide a solution for them, whether that's consulting or a product or service or whatever it is. Maybe I could do that. So it started to train your mind in this way. So be thinking about those questions, be training your mind to think in terms of problems over solutions. This was very philosophical. We're talking about value capture, value exchange, kind of at a high level. In the next episode, I want to get into business model thinking, like how the exchange actually works on a more tangible level. So we're going to start zooming in on the next episode. And I want to talk a little bit about business models and how you can start to think in terms of what business model are you going to use to deliver the solutions for the problems you're starting to identify. So now your homework this week is to look for problems around you. And then next time on the next show, we're going to talk about some of those business models. We want to hear from you though. What's coming up for you? Again, I'm assuming you're putting against, your ethical, ideological, philosophical stuff aside. Feel free to say that stuff too. I'm sure someone's going to have something to say about what we're talking about as like unethical things. And it's just, it's cool. We can all have room for different opinions. That's all right. And my guess is though you're listening, you've been with us and you're vibing with what we're talking about and it's resonating with you. And I want to hear some of the ideas that are coming up for you. Where are you seeing problems right now that you might be able to offer solutions for? Where is that starving crowd in your life? Come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this show, you can leave a comment, ask a question, and more importantly, share your story, your personal experience, maybe with your own business life, your own work life, your own career. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes and various Android platforms. If you leave a rating and review for us on iTunes, it helps us out a lot. Our book is out. It's called Personality Hacker. Get a copy at all major book retailers. And if you leave a rating and review on Amazon or on Goodreads, that also helps us out a lot. And of course, if you would like to invest more in your personal growth journey using personality type and models of understanding, go over to personalityhacker.com, look at our product catalog, and see if there's one that's right for you.
I'd like to recommend Hardwired for Wealth, which is our program that basically talks about unique personality types, pathway to creating wealth in their life. So we break it down by cognitive function and how this might resonate with you. If you're thinking about starting a business, there might be a pathway that's more tailored to you based on how you're wired. So Hardwired for Wealth, you could check that out in our product catalog if that's something interesting. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.